Hello, everybody. This is the Authority podcast presented by Minority Authority, the brand. My name is Darnell. And for this week's podcast, I decided to do a book review, keeping in line with what I've been previously doing in terms of how the flow of my podcast is going. So this week was a week for a book review. The book that I'm going to review for this podcast is one that I just finished up, and I kind of wanted to do a book review about it, kind of while it was still fresh in my mind. And so I chose this book. So I try to hurry up and finish it up a day or two before I got to this podcast, and we are here today. So the book that I wanted to do a book review on is called Black Men, Obsolete, Single, and Dangerous. This is the book. Um, Not too thick of a book. I picked it up. I think I might have picked it up on Amazon, maybe. As it's usually where I buy all my books from. Um, I just happened to be scrolling through Instagram one day, and I don't even know if I follow this guy. It might have been in the news reel or something like that on Instagram. I don't know exactly how social media works like that with the algorithm and all that. But anyway, it was a list of books that the guy had recommended. Now, I got my fair share of books, and I got a lot of times I buy them, and sometimes I can't get to them when I want to. But I ended up buying this book, and whenever I got it, I read it, and that's pretty much how I came to get to this book. The author, I'm not even too sure if I'm gonna pronounce his name right, is Haki Madhubuti. So his name is down at the bottom. I'm pretty sure I didn't butcher that name. I haven't heard anything about him. I don't know much about the author. I'm not even too sure if he has any more books. Um, but I'm pretty sure if I continue to read, like Black history and stuff like that, which it really fascinates me, then I'll probably end up coming across more of his books if he has wrote any more. So anyway, um, the book review. The book review is, if you haven't listened or watched any before, I basically scored on five different categories on a scale of 1 to 5, one being worst, or one being the lowest scored, five being the best. The five categories are execution, flow, or order of a book. And that basically means, does it go from one chapter to the other fairly easy, and does it pick off where it left off, or does it pick up where it left off from the last chapter? Basically, the flow of it. Is it easy transitions from chapter 1 to 2, or from 3 to 4, or whatever, so forth. The second category in which I score on is length. This is a subjective kind of scoring point for me. I believe that a good book, or a good length of a book, enough for you to be able to make a case or state a purpose and make a case for it, is probably somewhere between 200 and 300 pages. Longer books are fine. It usually means you're going to get a lot of backstory to it. Shorter books, to me, I believe it's harder for someone to make a case within a shorter book, depending on what the topic is. So, as I said, it's kind of subjective, but that's kind of my scoring category in terms of length. Usually 200 to 300 pages if it's a book that you're trying to make an argument for. The third category is references or works cited or research. Um, how much research did you put into the book, and if it's cited? That's pretty straightforward. The fourth category is level of difficulty or amount of jargon. Every field that people work in, or every field that there usually is some level of jargon that they use within the field. If you're a police officer, they get on the radios and they use codes. If you're a doctor, they use certain terminology that the layperson such as myself might not understand. And if that happens to be a book, then it's difficult to read unless you're in that field of some sort. And that's scored 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, or basically a bunch of jargon in it, which would make it hard to read, or 5 being it's fairly easy to read and understand for a layperson like myself. Correlation between argument and providing supporting evidence. The point that you're making, did you provide good evidence for the points that it was that you were making? And so those are my 5 categories. Now, I'm going to take a few pages out of this book to use as an example, and I'm going to try to expound on them a little bit, because I just wanted to talk about them, I guess. So let me start off by saying, and I wrote some stuff down, so just bear with me while I go through it. So the book, for starters, it's 273 pages, which is somewhere in the middle between my subjective argument for how long I believe a book is to make a strong case. The book touches on a variety of topics. It touches on monogamy, polygamy, any kind of sorts of marriage. There's another one in there, and I couldn't find it for the review, which I hadn't heard before, but I think it's a combination of monogamy and polygamy. And I'm not even too sure if that's what it is, but it's somewhere in between monogamy and polygamy, or maybe just, I don't know. It's maybe a combination of those. He touches on AIDS, and I guess attacks on the African American community, things that people believe that were purposely centered around the black community in order to keep them segmented from the mainstream population or divided within the community. Policing. There is a dialogue where there is a part of the book where he's talking to a black police officer, and it's quite insightful about what the black police officer was saying about him policing black communities. Now, this book, I believe, was wrote in the late 80s or the early 90s, but some of the things that they were talking about in the book, it was just pretty insightful. Like the guy that he was talking to, as an example, talks about black people's mentality towards black police officers, and how I guess black criminals, for instance, would be more receptive to what a white police officer was saying if it was complying or whatever, in terms of their demands, or maybe not necessarily complying, but I guess the guy was saying that black criminals fear white police officers more than they do black police officers. So I believe that was an interesting perspective that the guy was speaking from, and it was a whole dialogue. It probably was about 4 pages long, but it was something that stuck out to me in the book. Another thing that he talks about in the book, which I think I've talked about on one of my podcasts. I mean, I don't have a million podcasts at this point, but I'm deep in enough that I feel like I'm to the point where I felt like I've talked about something, but I can't reference it off the top of my head. But one of the things that he talks about is our mentality about prison, the black community's mentality about prison. And this was in a dialogue between the author and the police officer that he was talking with. The police officer was basically saying that black men look at prison as a rite of passage, like a baptism of some sorts. They believe that when you go to prison, that this makes you a man, or it makes you ready for the world. And it's unfortunate. I've heard a lot of black guys say that they didn't even start reading until they went to prison, or that it didn't really hit them, or stuff didn't really sink in until they went to prison. And that's unfortunate, because at that point they might have spent 5-10 years of their adulthood in prison, and lost out on the opportunity to maybe go to college or to do something positive in their communities. So that was another thing that stuck out to me, and that was in just a dialogue of this author and the black police officer. So I mentioned earlier that there was a few things that he brought up that I want to address, and I'm going to read them. I got them on my screen, so I'm going to read them, and I want to try to expound on them a little bit and just discuss them before I give a book review. So, one of the things that he says in the book, he says, the real dilemma amongst blacks with money is that of values. Really, how many houses does one need? How many cars can one drive? How many vacations to Europe and to the Caribbean in a year are needed? How many closets of clothes can one wear? How much money must one accumulate to be successful or prove a point? And how much jewelry is necessary to make a statement of wealth? The black poor and middle class, by comparison, give more to the less fortunate of our people than the black rich. Many will observe that's why they are rich. Don't buy into that answer. The black rich and white rich are different and respond differently to their community, to their respective communities. The two groups also view their responsibilities to their people differently. The white rich start foundations, build art centers, finance new wings for museums and libraries, endow university chairs, create scholarships for the less fortunate of their people and others. The white rich finance all types of summer camps, help keep white businesses viable, start independent think tanks, support their writers, artists, and musicians, and buy sports franchises. The major businesses of the white rich is world control and domination while legitimizing the white way of life. The white rich hide their money and entrust their fortunes to lawyers, bankers, accountants, stockbrokers, and a highly trained and professional armed forces. I got more, but I wanted to say something about that because this, as I was saying, this was written in the either in the late '80s or the early '90s. There are a few things that I've personally seen that happens in the black community. I agree with what he's saying. What I see in the black community now is that I see a lot of things happen where people get famous and they get a little money and they'll come back and they'll buy all the kids Jordans. They'll pay for their school clothes or something like that. And that's cool. It looks good. But it doesn't do anything for the proliferation of the black community. Those kids are going to wear those school clothes, they're going to grow out of them by the next year, and it's totally forgotten. The person who did it feels good about it, and I'm glad they do that, but we need to be thinking more long-term in terms of the community. Another thing that he said that I wanted to point out, I want to see if I can find this. He said, how much jewelry is necessary to make a statement of wealth? A chain, a necklace in the black community is a, I don't know what you would call this, but over the past 4 or 5 years, I don't know, maybe even longer than that, I would say over the past 10 years, if you are able to snatch a rapper's chain and be able to put it on Instagram, you can get a ransom for it. If you snatch a rapper's chain in the commission of a crime, you get brownie points in your neighborhood. So it seems more like we are fascinated or enamored with showing off wealth. Like as I was saying, this was written over 25 years ago. Let me finish up. What I'm trying to make clear to others and myself is that serious, honest, incorruptible, ethical, and competent men and women in the are in a clear minority in the Black America. So what he's basically saying, because I kind of fumbled over that a little bit, is that people who are upstanding in the Black community are few and far between. Um, Such people need to be identified, encouraged, supported, rewarded, and protected. Black thinkers are constantly caught between a hurricane and a volcano. For example, to constructively question or criticize African American leaders like Jesse Jackson, Louis Farrakhan, Coretta Scott King, Benjamin Hooks, or the big black in any city is not looked upon by the leadership or the majority of black people as the responsibility or duty of serious thinkers and activists. The big black is italicized. That's basically uh, the most important people in whatever city that you might be in. Rather, such actions often are reduced to a betrayal of the race. Black people who think, or more accurately, those who think and disagree with the accepted line, no matter how inadequate a policy or program may be, always suspect are always suspected and locked out. The reaction of the public to the criticism of accepted black leadership often is personal, overlooks the possible validity of the criticism, and reduces a public problem to a personal one. As long as our condition is reduced to the egos of a few insecure men and women, there can never be progress or development. So basically what he's saying is if you continue to toe the line and you're not asking the most important questions that need to be asked in terms of community advancement, then you're wasting your time. It's not so much about putting a person in power because they look like you. Because I know that's the accepted thing now. We got a black person in power. So of course they're gonna speak for our interests, or they're gonna speak on our behalf. A lot of the politicians that are put in power aren't from your dollar. A lot of the politicians in general, and I'm not even just talking about black politicians. I'm talking about politicians in general. They are funded by big business. I think Dr. Claude Anderson said that politics are quid pro quo. You do something for me, I do something for you. So while it may appear that a black person is there and they look like they may have your best interest, well, if Clorox Bleach is funding their campaign, who do you think they're going to speak for? There's no Clorox Bleach factory in the hood. It's not going to be for you. They are more likely going to speak for people who are interested in securing their futures, because that's how things get done in America. It's quid pro quo. Another thing that I wanted to talk about with this is I remember when Barack Obama was in office, there was a poverty tour that Dr. Cornel West and Tavis Smiley, I'm sorry, I said Travis, Tavis Smiley went out on. And they were basically criticizing President Obama for not being more hawkish on poverty in America. The black community shunned him. Now these are two, you don't necessarily have to agree with everything that these people are saying, but these are two of the most brightest and the most highly respected people in our community. As I was saying, you don't have to agree with what they're saying, but it's definitely okay to leave an ear open to listen to them. The black community shunned him because it was Obama. Obama is an articulate politician. He has a black wife. He's a nice guy. He has charm. Of course, he means great, right? He got all of these positive qualities about himself. I believe Obama had good intentions in his heart. I don't think he was black enough, though. I don't think, when I say black enough, I'm not saying he didn't sag his pants or he didn't play basketball good enough. Actually, he did play basketball. But when I say black enough, that's not what I'm talking about when I say black enough. I'm talking about being able to speak for the interest of the black community. As a black person, I believe, depending on where you're from, as a black person, I believe that you have some kind of insight as to what the black community is going through. Now, I understand Obama had somewhat of a upbringing that wasn't necessarily how an average African American black would come up, but I think he was a little soft on issues in terms of poverty in terms of black issues. And poverty is not a black issue; it's an American issue. But I believe that he personally should have said more things, or he should have been more hawkish about policies that benefited the black community. Even though a lot of black people voted to put him in office, our small contributions really didn't matter, especially when I think Obama's campaign was $1 billion campaign. That's just to run for president. Those $5 and $10 donations, they probably got him there to some extent, but it's big business who's really kicking down and saying, hey, we think you might speak for our interest. Let me see if I want to go over this last point that I was talking that I took a picture of that I wanted to read. I go over it. The Negro Philosophy of Life, and this is out of the book also. The Negro Philosophy of Life. So he writes down 10 different points of what he believes. I wouldn't call a person a coon for this, but just somebody who is not necessarily keen on the issues of the black community and maybe don't care. So the Negro Philosophy of Life, there are 10 points. He say ignorant of self, filled with self-hatred, and has no idea of who he or she is, runs from knowledge that may alter such feelings. The reason why I do this podcast, because I know what education itself has done for me as a black man in America. So whenever I try to present knowledge or try to present information that I believe is building of the person that I may be speaking to, I do that with the intentions, or I do that with the black community in heart. Knowledge of self is super important. Prevailing education, what you learned in public school, what you learned in private school, doesn't do it. Being black, whatever your idea of being black is, whether that's culturally, whether that means doing things a certain way, if you are, I don't know, whatever you believe is black, sometimes it's not enough. When you go to work out, you have to work out on a regular basis in order for you to maintain what it is that you have. In order for you to understand and continue to be immersed in your blackness, you have to continue to learn about your blackness. And that doesn't mean going to the family reunion every year. It means learning something, even if you're not picking up a book. Now, I'm sorry, I'm going to go on because I'll get to talking. And I want to try to finish everything because I haven't even got to the book review yet. Number 2, believes that white people follow their own laws, rules, ethics, pronouncements, and declarations. However, the Negro will follow white laws, rules, ethics, pronouncements, and declarations, even to his own detriment. How things are done in the white community doesn't necessarily work for you. That's pretty much what it is. We were sold false hope of assimilation. Doesn't work. You straighten your hair out. You straighten your back up. You talk professional. Don't get you any further. Believes that in the United States, a person's color, hair, religion, politics, wealth, and the way he or she speaks English are immaterial and not important to non-black individuals and institutions. Basically, everybody but black people can get away with certain stuff that we can't. Number 4, believes that money can buy one's freedom and liberty. I said this story, I'll say it again. LeBron, who is an Akron native, owned a house in Brentwood, I believe. Somebody spray painted nigger on his fence. LeBron, I believe, is worth about $500 million. He might even be worth more than that. You don't escape with money. You escape with a community. You escape with people who you're bringing up with you so that y'all can share in y'all problems or that y'all can share in y'all successes. But you can't be the nigga at the top of the hill looking down on all of the black people thinking you better than everybody. Because white people gonna put you right back down at the bottom of the hill with all the other niggas. Number 5, believes that the answer to the Negro's problem is lots of prayer and who you know. Trusts white people and believes that most of them are fair-minded on the race question. Everybody is motivated by comeuppance, I guess. Like everybody is motivated by their own, the things that they want to accomplish. And white and black, historically, white and black agendas they've never been on the same page. Put it that way. Number 6, believes that a job or position with the Fortune 1000 company is security and progress, and that those who do not have such are either lazy, lacking ambition, or living in the 60s. I think James Baldwin said this. He said, let me see if I don't butcher this. I'm praying I don't butcher it. He said that the black middle class are more middle class than they are black. Most choices that are made in the United States, I don't want to say most choices, but most people, whenever it comes down to making a decision, is usually aligned with their color, where you're going to live in a community, where do you work. Most people, except black people, because we haven't had the opportunities to build up our communities in such way. But if that were the case, I believe that most black people will want to work with other black people. And I believe that that's fine if we live in an equitable society, which means that everybody has the same opportunity to do the same things. Number 7, believes that true democracy exists in the United States and that capitalism is the best economic system. I don't know how I feel about that one. I do like capitalism. There are other forms of government, but capitalism, to me, if it's going to be, in order for capitalism to work, it has to be equitable, which is basically what I was talking about whenever I was reading the previous point. It has to be equitable. Everybody has to have the same opportunity, and that's the best situation that's going to happen. Number 8, advocates capital punishment, gun control, prayer in schools, quota, anti-quota laws, and anti-abortion legislation. I don't know how I feel about that one. Number 9, in a world ruled by unified groups, the Negro is the world's most confirmed individualist, believes that a person will eventually come and save him. I think I discussed this on a podcast with the Deion Sanders thing. The saving isn't going to come from a messiah. It's not going to come from one black person. It's going to come from the group. And we have to exercise group economics in order for that to work. And the last point, number 10, believes that the mass media, press, television, radio are fair, unbiased, and free. That is totally false. The media, the news, the radio, they all engage in propaganda. And they do it to fit whatever narrative that they're looking for, whether it means they need to sell a product, or whether it means they're trying to tell you to devalue who you are as a person. Black people are doing a knockout game. I remember like some years ago, Bill O'Reilly was saying that they were doing a knockout game. Chinese hate. That's been a few years ago, where they're saying that the black kids are basically walking up to Chinese people and punching them. That's all propaganda. Whenever that stuff was on, you see a video or two of somebody punching a Chinese person. It's 350 million people in America. At any given time, you can find anybody punching somebody. So let me get to the book review. I'm sorry. So for this book, the execution or order or flow of it, I gave it a 2 out of 5. I gave it a 2 out of 5 because I believe that the book touched on too many topics to be the size that it did. I don't want to say it was kind of all over the place, but if the author were going to touch on that many topics, it probably should have been more like a 500-page book. The length of the book. The length of the book, I gave it a 3 on this one. The length of the book, I gave it a 3 because it is in between my idea of what I believe a good length is for a specific topic, but I kind of took it down a little bit because it wasn't a specific topic. It was multiple topics. And as I was saying in the last point, he had a lot of things that he was talking about, and in order for you to put that in a 250-page book, it's not going to read well. Number 3, research, reference, or works cited. To works cited, I gave a 3. I didn't see a lot of works cited in the book, but one of the things that the author did that I liked is that if you wanted to further your reading, this guy cited, I don't know, he probably put maybe 50 authors, or he shouted out 50 authors in there, and probably another 50 books, which, to be honest with you, whenever it comes time for me to get finished reading a book, I'll probably go through this book to look up other authors and other books to read those. So because he didn't cite his work or whatever, I took it down, but I did kind of break even on it because for that reason, that he was able to provide all that information. Level of difficulty or amount of jargon. He did good on this one, so I gave him a 4. Wasn't a lot of terminology that a layperson couldn't understand. And for correlation between argument and providing supporting evidence, I gave him a 2 on that one. And this kind of goes back to the points that I made in 1 and 2 and 3. I didn't make it in 3, but I made it in 1 and 2. He tried to touch on a lot of topics in 250 pages. It's kind of hard to do that and be able to cite work. So out of a total of 25, I gave this book a 14. 14 out of 25. So that's somewhere, I don't know, y'all probably smarter than me with math, so y'all can do the math on that. That's probably like a 50%, I guess, or something like that. So that is my review. Thank you for watching, and that is my time.